feel so lonely. The world is spinning round slowly. There's nothing you can show me from behind the wall. Show me from behind the wall. Show me from behind the wall. Show me from behind.
Caetano Veloso, probably pronounced wrong, is a Brazilian singer-songwriter and political activist. He was part of the Tropicalia movement, who were protesting about the military government in the 60s. In 1967, he won first prize in a lyrics contest. In 1968, he was part of a disastrous concert in Rio, which culminated in large numbers of the student audience turning their backs on the band, and in retaliation, the band turning their backs on the audience. The following year, he was arrested after allegations that he'd sung a derogatory version of the national uh, 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 anthem. Sorry. He was imprisoned without a trial and then exiled. He went to London but was not happy there. In 1972, he went back to Brazil. Things calmed down and he got on with having a musical career and is still going. So I counted 36 studio albums, 4 of which are called Caetano Veloso, 22 live albums, 11 soundtrack albums, and he's worked with some people that I've heard of, including his good friend Gilberto Gil and Os Mutantes. Hi, my name's Dan, as always, and this is an album by Veloso, or however you pronounce it. I can't tell you which number album it is because these things can get a bit confused. It's my first encounter with this album and with him, but I have listened to some of this Tropicalia before, and I found so what I do when I do these reviews that I usually listen once, do some reading, and then listen again. One of the things I try and do is to give some context to the albums. And over the period of doing this list, I've had a few Tropicalia albums, which is this Brazilian movement that was in opposition to the current government in the 60s. And I've been highly intrigued by this. When we think of, Western, well, I guess Brazil is Western, but when you think of North American or European artists who are, making a big thing about being rebels and whatever, they're nothing on these guys who actually were genuinely rebellious against their government, and some of them got imprisoned and all sorts of things happened. So he was part of that, and I've come across Gilberto Gil, who was a good friend of uh, Caetano's. I understand. So this was recorded, this album, while he was in London, which was while he was in exile. It was the same year that he actually got back to Brazil, but it was recorded before that. And it was a mixture of kind of traditional Latin rhythms and rock band instruments. I particularly feel that there's a leaning here towards some of the lighter, folky end of psychedelic rock has kind of found its way into here. There's definitely a focus on nylon strung guitar. I would struggle to know exactly what to call that. Basically, I want to call it a classical guitar, but this isn't classical music, but it's the same instrument that's used for classical guitar music. And of course, singing. Some of the singing, most of the singing is in Portuguese, but some of it's in English. There are a few kind of different tracks in here. So, uh, well, actually, I'm not saying this is particularly different, but one track refers to Portobello Road in London, and the fact that he was recording it in London kind of brings that as a highlight. One track is a more traditional samba, which is so it's not a track that he wrote, and it's a reinterpretation of this, I believe. See if I can get this right. Mora la filosofia. And I'm not sure what that means. I tried to look it up, and I think it means he has to go to philosophy, but I'm not sure. The last track on the album is more of a rock and roll track, um, which, gives them some interesting variety. Neolithic Man is a track which is a bit more avant garde, almost kind of avant garde jazz at times. Now, I understand that the Veloso was before this had a more kind of avant-garde approach to music. He was certainly involved with doing stuff with Os Mutantes, who were a band who were part of the same movement who are quite avant-garde, the stuff that I've come across with them. So there's some interesting kind of tensions there in that track. It's quite a long track. It's interesting. Mostly, so apart from that track, is not so much of the gentleness, but mostly it's got this kind of gentle, laid-back feeling that I associate with Brazilian popular music, MPB, I think is what it's called. And it's got this kind of lightness and optimism to it. It always seems interesting to me that this Tropicalia movement is centered around music that is so airy that, again, in the traditions I'm more used to, you'd think of rebellious music as being hard and heavy, and this wasn't. It was kind of had this airiness to it, which is great. It's nice. So it's added to that. You've got some great musicality. You've got some nice singing. Bizarrely, at times, his voice reminded me of Jim Morrison of The Doors. Maybe it's the tone of his voice. Maybe it's just even down to the reverb that he was using, to the particular production on his voice. But it's certainly not got the same kind of intensity as Jim Morrison has in the way that he sings, but the tone of his voice is good. So I'm rambling now, so I'll try and stop doing that. I Overall, I would say I quite like this album. It's a pleasant listening experience. As always, I'd love to know what you'd think of this album, so please do leave a comment, and that's it from me for now.